He had given everything for his country. Now, the world seemed determined to give nothing back. Job after job, door after door, slammed shut. His uniform no longer opened doors. It only reminded people of what they thought he couldn't do. A man who once faced the chaos of battle now faced the quiet, crushing war of everyday life. But when despair whispered that his purpose was over, he found a new battlefield, and it wasn't about war. It was about healing, not just himself, but those who had been forgotten like him. The job interview ended before it even began. The manager's eyes lingered on his faded army jacket, then slid past his face as though he were invisible. "We'll call you," she said, voice polite but sharp, a thin layer of pity behind it. He stood in the empty hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzing above, and realized he was invisible, not because he was small or weak or unprepared, but because the world had already decided he was no longer useful. Outside, the city pulsed with life. Cars honked, people rushed by, unaware that one man carried the weight of battles fought in silence, battles that no medal could fix. He was Thomas Riley, 34, a veteran who had seen deserts burn under the noon sun and heard the deafening silence of a fallen squad mate's absence. His hands bore the faint tremor of old injuries. His jaw carried the tension of nights spent alone, wide-eyed, haunted by memories he could not shake. Yet he walked through the streets as though he were invisible, carrying a quiet dignity that refused to bow to public indifference. His boots, scuffed and worn, clicked against the pavement, each step a reminder that he was moving forward, even if the world refused to move with him. Thomas had enlisted at 18, eager to serve, to belong to something greater than himself. He remembered the first day he put on the uniform, the scent of new fabric mixed with the metallic tang of anticipation. His mother had hugged him tightly, whispering, "Come back safe," not knowing that some wars never allowed a return in the way anyone expected. Deployment had been chaos distilled into heat and dust. He had run through deserts where the sun burned his skin and the silence screamed louder than any gunfire. He had smelled the smoke of destroyed villages, the acrid tang of fear, and the salt of tears. Some his own, some left behind by the friends who would never make it home. Each loss had carved lines into his heart. His closest friend, Marco, had fallen beside him, leaving a note clenched in his hand. "Look after the others. Live, Thomas. That's how we win." Thomas had survived physically, but the invisible wounds were relentless. Nights were the hardest, when the world was quiet and the memories were loud. The uniform he wore at home felt heavier than any battlefield vest. When he returned, he expected relief, gratitude, maybe even understanding. Instead, he found doors closed, eyes averted, and conversations that ended the moment his service was mentioned. The city he had protected seemed to have no place for him, no understanding of what he had endured. Every day, Thomas searched for work. He carried resumes like fragile shields, polished shoes that reflected his dedication, and a mind sharpened by discipline and problem-solving honed under life and death pressure. Yet every interview ended the same way. Polite dismissal, veiled excuses, nods that said, "Thank you for your service, but we don't have a place for you." It wasn't just employment. It was respect. The world had a quiet, systemic way of turning veterans into ghosts. At the supermarket, cashiers barely looked up when he handed over a card. At the bus stop, passengers shifted, subconsciously distancing themselves. Every glance, every slight, reinforced the sense that the person who had once held the line, who had run into fire while others ran away, now carried nothing of value. But Thomas refused to give despair the satisfaction of seeing him bow. His dignity remained intact, a silent rebellion against a society too polite to confront its own negligence. Weeks passed. He tried temp work, day labor, even freelance gigs, each a reminder of doors closing. Yet in each failure, he noticed something. Other veterans like him, struggling silently. In coffee shops, in bus stations, in community centers, he saw faces marked by invisible wounds, lives quietly unraveling under the weight of indifference. One evening, sitting on a park bench, Thomas watched a young veteran shuffle past, head down, clutching a worn backpack. He saw the hopelessness in his eyes, the same hopelessness he had felt in his own reflection. And for the first time, Thomas understood. His battles were not over, but they had shifted. He had fought to protect others, and now maybe he could fight to protect those forgotten in the aftermath. He returned home that night, the city lights flickering like distant stars through his window. He thought about Marco's note again. Look after the others. He thought about the veterans he had seen, the despair etched into their faces, and the skills, resilience, and leadership that society had failed to recognize. By morning, he had a plan. Not a business in the traditional sense. Something more personal, more urgent. A network, a hub for veterans, a place where skills were recognized, trauma was understood, and healing was possible. He called it Second March, a name that spoke to resilience, to the next step after war. He started small. Workshops on resume building, financial literacy, peer counseling. Slowly, others joined. Veterans who could teach skills, who could mentor, who understood the silent battles fought every day. The office was modest, a single room with a few chairs, donated computers, and walls decorated with old unit patches, flags, and photos of camaraderie. Not everyone was supportive. Banks doubted his plan, calling it idealistic. City officials offered tepid encouragement, masking their disbelief with bureaucratic politeness. Some community members whispered, "Why invest in people who can't find work? They've already failed once." Each setback was a test, a moral tension that threatened to undo him. He had learned to survive in the face of bullets. Now he needed to survive in the face of silence and skepticism. Yet Thomas refused to argue, to raise his voice. He let the work speak, the impact grow quietly, unassumingly. Months passed and small victories accumulated. Veterans walked out with confidence, some returning to work, others finding their purpose in mentorship. Families who had been fractured began to reconnect. The city, which had ignored the quiet pain of its protectors, began to notice. Articles appeared in local papers, social media posts spread, and soon the network of support became a visible force. Then came the moment that shifted everything. A major corporation, initially skeptical, sent a representative to visit. They were met, not with a pitch, but with a room full of veterans sharing their stories. Stories of courage, loss, and newfound hope. The company pledged funding, partnerships, and employment opportunities. The silent strength Thomas had cultivated had become impossible to ignore. On the day of Second March's first large graduation ceremony, the room was full. Families, veterans, supporters, all stood quietly as Thomas entered. No fanfare, no speeches, just acknowledgement, deep and sincere. Veterans lined up to receive certificates, each handshake and hug a testament to resilience and dignity. Outside, a banner hung across the street. "For those who served, we stand with you." The community that had once ignored them now watched, not with curiosity, but with respect. Journalists documented the event. Social media exploded with stories of transformation, and for the first time, Thomas felt the quiet victory of a war fought without bullets, but with heart. Thomas reflected on the journey. The world may still misunderstand veterans, may still close doors, may still whisper doubts. But he had discovered that healing wasn't about what the world gave him. It was about what he could give back. He had found purpose in lifting others, in creating a sanctuary where silent heroes could be seen, understood, and honored. Every battle we survive shapes us, he thought. But the real victory is when we help someone else survive too. He looked directly into the camera with a quiet smile. "Tell me where you're watching from." Share your thoughts about those who quietly fight every day, and subscribe if you want to see more stories that honor true heroes. Because in the end, dignity, courage, and honor are never invisible. They are seen in every life we touch.